Welcome back. Yes, I think you can tell the East Coast Bias Boys are here at Radio Row. Super Bowl 59. We're in the flesh. Joe House, Raheem Palmer, and John Jastrzemski. Let's get right to it. It's the Chiefs. It's the Eagles. Second time in 3 years. And, you know, House, I mentioned that Chief fatigue. I think we've all had it. The Eagles, been there and done that. But the matchup, it's juicy. It's a revenge angle for the Eagles. It's Barkley and what he's provided as a 2,000-yard rusher. And then Kansas City sells themselves going for a three-peat, which we've been around a long time. We've never seen it. The Patriots dominated. Super Bowl 59, a lot to offer.
Yeah, I don't feel any fatigue whatsoever. I'm thrilled to have the Chiefs with a chance at a three-peat. These don't come down the pike very often. And the thing about this one, some people are saying that the rematch is boring. What's boring about Saquon Barkley rushing for 2,000 yards? This Eagles team is radically different than that Philadelphia team from a couple of years ago. And that, to me, sets up a matchup, a cat and mouse game that I really can't wait to get into, especially with the different coordinators on the Philadelphia side. These dudes have been around the block a little bit. Love Vic Fangio and Mahomes, even with the lack of success that he's had against it. The storylines just come up and pop you right in the face. I can't wait to get down with this thing.
And what's interesting, Raheem, is that we were here 2 years ago talking about this matchup.
Yeah.
And Philadelphia kind of was bulldozing everybody in the NFC. You looked at their road to the Super Bowl. It was a giant team that overachieved. It was not any good. They knocked out Brock Purdy in the opening series. And then they get into the Super Bowl. Their offense delivered. Their defense did not. This version of Philadelphia, to me, is a better version of the Eagles than the one we saw in Glendale and in Phoenix, because you have Saquon Barkley. There's better. I know Steichen and Gannon are head coaches. I feel better about the coaching with Fangio and with Kellen Moore doing their thing. And I just like the overall feel of the Eagles from a roster standpoint better this time around than 2 years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the big key is the defense. You got guys like Jalen Carter. I think he has the potential to absolutely wreck this game. And if you watch the Philadelphia Eagles this year, what they did to that Cincinnati Bengals offense that was scoring on everybody, it tells you how amazing this defense is. And then when you bring in Saquon Barkley into the fold, a guy who rushed for 2,000 yards and sat out week 18, it lets you know how dangerous this team is.
So you're in a spot, House, that scares me. Not you, but just if you're going to side with Philadelphia in this game. And guess what? There are a lot of compelling arguments to make the case that the Eagles can win. However, House, I'm going to warn you something. I was in this exact chair a year ago when I looked at every matchup and I said, the San Francisco 49ers are better than the Chiefs. They're going to beat them. We all know what happened 2 years ago. I thought Philadelphia, pound for pound, was a better team than the Chiefs. Got off to a lead. We know what happened. Is there a script where the Eagles can win a close game? Because my feeling is, no. I've seen the Chiefs in so many of these games snake it, find a way. Raheem bets them live. Everybody's giddy, except for me, because I'm on the other side. I almost feel like if you're making the case for Philadelphia to go and win this game, they got to go and win and lay the smack down.
So, look, I don't have any quibble with that approach to it. But I also think it's possible the jig could be up at some point. Last year's Super Bowl, you mentioned it, there were 7 fumbles in that football game. And the Chiefs were on the correct side of quite a few of those. There were penalty calls that I won't go down that path. But look, at some point, and I told you guys on this show, I think it was week 14, that I was looking for an opportunity to fade the Chiefs. Because at some point, simple math tells you that the world doesn't simply revolve around a Kansas City axis.
You sure?
You sure? There is lots of proof on the side of that, but at some point the ball will not bounce the Chiefs' way. It could be in a straight up game where I'm looking at, I'll do the matchups. We can do the matchups. I like the Eagles.
So you're willing to bet against Michael Jordan. That's what you're telling us.
Here's the thing. There's plenty of ways to cover your
I understand that.
Okay.
There are
I
plenty of
understand
ways to
that.
cover
And
it.
listen, I think you have been all over this. You mentioned it on our pod last week, and I know you're going to hit on it here. There's a script in these games with Kansas City. They fall behind.
Yes.
They fell behind
they
against
do.
the Niners, down by 10. They fell behind against the Eagles. They fell behind against the Niners. So are you more than willing, Raheem, to say, you know what? First half, I think House's Eagles will have the lead.
So I've been explaining this to people all week. My model actually makes the Eagles 3 to 3.5 point favorites. So I actually think the wrong team is favored. But you have to take into account who has the better quarterback. That's Patrick Mahomes. Who has the better coach? That's Andy Reid and Spagnuolo. So it's very difficult to bet against those guys for a full game. In the first half, I think you can play the Eagles. I think the Eagles are going to come out. They're going to pass a little bit more than people think they will. I think they will take the lead. And then in the second half, you're going to see Mahomes do what he typically does. So that's how I'm looking. Eagles first half, and then try to play the Chiefs live.
So you mentioned the creative ways you want to kind of play this.
Yes.
You're leaning in a Philadelphia perspective side. How exactly is that case made, House?
So the very first thing is to make sure that you have that Chiefs outcome covered and make it lucrative for yourself. The Cousin Sal has been giving this out for 2 years now. Take Dream's position on the Eagles in the first half and bet the Chiefs to win the game. That is available right this second on the FanDuel Sportsbook at plus 750. That is one way to cover yourself. And then I have a couple of teasers. We're at the stage of the season where you must put a total leg alongside the outcome leg. I have the Eagles plus 7.5, and I have them under 55 and over 43. So you can
really
play
are
that
covered
on
every
a
which way.
giant 12-point middle. If it lands in the middle, you win both bets.
I'm
Go
glad
ahead.
you mentioned the total. No, because it segues exactly to where I want to go here, Raheem. These teams played 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Shootout galore. Philadelphia did whatever they wanted to do. Kansas City came alive in the second half. The Hurts fumble was key, changed the game. Kansas City does their thing in the second half. These iterations of these two teams, don't they kind of lean you towards an under?
No.
They don't.
So for me, I just think both teams are going to be passing a lot more. Now, this is how I tend to look at things with Super Bowls. Super Bowls always start off slow. If you look at 14 out of the last 20 Super Bowls with a total of 48, they have gone under in the first half. So the way I like to play this is second half, highest scoring half, minus 105. You watched the Super Bowl last year. How many points were scored in the first half? They put up like 30 plus points in the second half. So I like to go second half, highest scoring half. Also like second half over 23.5. So I think you're going to see a lower scoring first half. And in the second half, all chaos breaks loose as one or both of these teams are chasing each other.
So you mentioned your way of teasing it. Which one do you prefer? It seems like you prefer the underside of things.
I honestly prefer over 43. That's the way that
It's
I
a
look
low
at it.
total.
So
Then under a 57 or 58 is pretty high, though.
yeah, but Dream's chaos theory could definitely come home to roost. We've seen it in Super Bowls before, and we've seen it with these Chiefs. I love both of his second half bets. Those are both, to me, outstanding ways of sizing this game up and to go ahead and make a little investment, cover off that aspect as well.
Okay, make the case for me to how Philadelphia wins this game. For me, it's pretty simple. We saw James Cook 2 weeks ago, second half, won all over the Chiefs. The biggest mistake is Buffalo inexplicably stopped using him. They didn't give him the football enough. Barkley, no knock on James Cook, tremendous back. Barkley's a different caliber of running back, and he has been all year. And he's been the engine for Philly all year. Is your case for the Eagles heavy dose of Barkley and that defense and Carter and the defensive line doing their thing, or is there something else I'm missing?
No, it's literally trench warfare, and it does indeed start on the offensive side, which to me, I think this iteration of the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line is the best that they've had in the entirety of their run, which is a really remarkable thing considering
Kelsey's
their
retired.
own center. But they just pick right back up. The guy that replaced Kelsey has had an incredible season. And to me, the thing that really reveals itself is if you go back to, I think, week 14, Kansas City's run defense has been very vulnerable.
It's leaky.
Yes.
They've been giving up. It wasn't just, I mean, you had the good example of Cook. Before that, Joe Mixon had 18 carries for 88 yards. I mean, honestly, Houston was in that game. They beat themselves with turnovers. And if you go week by week, from that week 14 on, the running backs that the Kansas City Chiefs faced all had performances that were above their season averages in terms of yards per carry, in terms of yards after contact. I'm not sure what the explanation is for why that's the case, but I certainly like the idea of the Eagles establishing themselves. I think the script is what Dream described. Philly comes out throwing, and then it's Saquon time. So that is the way that I sort of size this up.
Here's a question I have for you, because we all know special teams plays a huge role in these postseason games. Now, you have Harrison Butker for the Chiefs, but Jake Elliott, he hasn't been very
dreadful.
good all
It's been
year
dreadful.
long. How much is that a concern?
Important distinction. Jake Elliott indoors
Dome.
versus Jake Elliott
Okay.
outdoors.
That's a good point.
All of his garbage misses have been outdoor misses. And believe me, there was one that was still sticks in my craw from that Rams game that took that 6.5 down to 6. A big fat loser. But I'm not going to sit here and say I have the utmost confidence in Jake Elliott, but I do like the fact that they're in a dome.
So my fear factor here with Philadelphia, Raheem, they have the wide receivers to go and make plays. They're going to have Barkley doing his thing. I mean, the fact that FanDuel is setting the line at 110, and I'm not talking anybody out of playing the over, tells you what I think about Saquon Barkley. I know Jalen Hurts played well against Washington. The Washington defense and what Spagnuolo and what McDuffie and what the Chiefs can do is an entirely different breed. That, to me, is my fear factor. I don't feel great about Hurts going into this game.
I think Hurts is being a little underrated.
Interesting.
And I think he has a secret weapon, and it's the tight end, because we know the Chiefs, they struggle to defend tight ends. They've allowed almost 1,200 yards and 106 receptions to tight ends. Who's been the biggest player for the Eagles in the postseason? It's been Dallas Goedert. And there's a reason why his prop has gone from 47.5 to 50.5 receiving yards. So I like his over, and I also like his over receptions, 4.5. And I think they're going to be able to run the ball with Saquon Barkley, and Dallas Goedert is going to be his security blanket.
Okay, so I'm right there with you with Goddard. I love it. We talked about it when these prop lines came out. He's been very good to us out throughout this postseason. But are we concerned now with this line going up? Like at 46.5 to 50.5, does that change much for you?
No.
Me neither.
You know, it would scare me 65.5.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, oh my God, why are they doing 50? We're there. He might get it in the first half. I really think that Philly's going to establish RPO once they get the pass going, like a first series script. And I'll tell you this, when you were asking Dream about Hurts' concerns, I go to this spot. The pass that he threw on 4th and 5, it was a very pivotal pass.
That was a dime.
To A.J.
Absolute
Brown,
dime.
right on top of Marshawn Lattimore's head. I'll just leave it at that. That showed both a confidence, it showed a poise, it showed a confidence in the coaching staff. That was not a high probability play. It was an absolute dime. It was a game-winning throw because it did set the arc of the game in a Philly direction. And that to me clears up any kind of concerns Hurts-wise.
You know, the prop market could be a little overwhelming. I mean, let's just put it that way. You got so much you can get involved with for this game. And we've been getting into it throughout the postseason, which I think for us, House and Raheem, allows its feeling of comfortability as you hit the Super Bowl where you're like, hey, we had a good run. We've nailed a bunch of these props, whether it was you with some crazy long touchdown in the Rams Viking game. House, you had a few. But now that we dive into this, let's look at MVP for a second. The quarterback always, traditionally speaking, wins the award. And when you see Patrick Mahomes and the narratives there, you're like, okay, it's going to be him. Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts was on his way to winning the award 2 years ago before the game went a different way. I actually think, House, this game presents possibilities for guys other than Mahomes and other than Hurts to go and win the award. The obvious in Philly is Saquon because he's been the guy. You're going to maybe get invested as far as that goes. He's been unbelievable all season long. But are we talking about potentially the final game that Travis Kelce ever plays? And if Travis Kelce goes and puts on a show, can he maybe generate momentum there? I think it's a juicy price. It's maybe what I'm thinking about. The other one defensively, Chris Jones is a game wrecker. And if we're talking about the Kansas City defense, working their magic. Maybe it's a big fourth down stop. Maybe it's a big sack. Maybe it's a day where Kansas City is just not prolific offensively. Jones and Kelsey are two guys I'm looking at for MVP.
Those both make a ton of sense to me. And in fact, those would be ways of covering your chief outcome at prices that I thought I'd be interested in investing in, especially the Kelsey bit of it, because the one thing that the Eagles are willing to give up is a little bit of the middle of the field. I mean, we watched Zach Ertz with, I think he had 10 catches for 104 yards for Washington. He was really the only reliable weapon for Jaden Daniels against this Eagles defense. And I think the Eagles are kind of fine with yielding that kind of volume to the tight end as long as it doesn't end up in the end zone. So I prefer that one. The defensive one is hard for me because then you're talking about the big variance of who's responsible for creating turnovers. And that to me could land in a lot of different places. That is the pathway for Philadelphia to lose this football game, by the way. If they turn the ball over and we watch the Chiefs.
The entire postseason has been the theme.
That's been the theme. That's been the story. See, I disagree. See, I think if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, Mahomes is winning MVP. I mean, you have to think. What would Travis Kelce, what would his stat line have to be in order for him to
multiple
win?
touchdowns?
He would have
maybe a pick or two from Mahomes where it's not Mahomes at his best.
To me, Travis Kelce would have to put up 150 yards and 2 touchdowns in order to win.
Well, what if he has a similar stat line to the game against the Texans?
What did he have in that game?
Monster game. 100-plus yards, touchdown. And it was not a great Mahomes game.
But even then, the quarterback is just, they just tend to.
I get it, but he's won in a bunch. Maybe there's a little voter fatigue. He's won in a bunch. Hey, Deion Branch won a Super Bowl MVP. Julian Edelman won a Super Bowl MVP.
It would have to be an incredible catch at the end of the game where, the outcome, the inevitable Chiefs outcome that we expect. They win a very close one because Kelsey makes an incredible diving kind of thing, and it caps off a day where he's over 100 yards, near 10 catches, a touchdown, or even 2 touchdowns.
See, I think if you like the Eagles, there's more paths for other players to win MVP.
Okay, other than Saquon, who kind of appears the obvious non-quarterback, who do you like there?
I got 2.
Okay.
I got Jalen Carter at 75 to 1.
I like that.
Wow.
I just think the price is just, he has the ability to wreck a game. And you can see that. And look, if Mahomes is not going to win, it's going to be because you get like a Brandon Graham strip sack, which you saw in the Patriots Super Bowl. Another one is Devonta Smith. And the reason why I like Devonta Smith is because he's absolutely dominated this Chiefs team. You look at, he's played the Chiefs 3 times. He's had 99 yards in all 3 games. He's had 2 explosives in 3 games. And he's also had 6+ catches in all 3 of those games. So he could easily go out there and put up 150, 140 yards. And we know Jalen Hurts, he's one of these playoff games where he's throwing for like 200 yards. So I think there's more pass for Eagles other than Jalen Hurts to win Super Bowl MVP as opposed to Mahomes.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up Devonta Smith because it is a nice little transition here as far as some of the player props we're looking at Target and House. I feel like throughout this postseason, I have put my eggs in the Devonta Smith basket, and I've come up short in a couple of these. I had a great postseason, very happy at how it turned out, especially Championship Sunday, very good to us. Devonta Smith, though, to Raheem's point, I think the home run is going to be available to him. And I think if you're looking at longest reception, that's something I'm willing to get involved with. 50-plus receiving yards, that's something I'm willing to get involved with. Kansas City success, home run or 2, that's a player prop from a Philly sense I am all over. Are there any player props from a Philly side that are catching your eye?
Well, I mean, beyond the obvious, now we've made this case. Dallas Goedert has made it possible for us to have a very lucrative bankroll.
Oh, we love Dallas Goedert. He's been good to this show.
So, I mean, and Saquon, like, I want to be in some Saquon exotics. I like the idea of Saquon setting the Super Bowl record, which I think is like 170 yards, something around that area. And you can get a price in like 5 to 1 on something like that. But I like what you're talking about with Devontae, a player that should have opportunities because of the way that Kansas City wants to take away a comfort zone for Philadelphia on offense, try and take away Saquon, try and take away Dallas Goedert potentially. I mean, I don't think they're going to be able to do it, but maybe they'll key in, and that's where Devontae gets his opportunity. Dream.
So, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Raheem, are you more willing to get involved with Devonta Smith props? Are you laying off? Remember, You got McDuffie, who you can't overlook what he brings as far as physicality is concerned. So I'm very curious to see how Spags matches up that defense. Is it McDuffie on one side of the field? Is he shadowing A.J. Brown? Do they say, no, we're going to double A.J. Brown at times, or we're going to have him one-on-one on Devontae Smith? If you had to play props on one of the two Eagle receivers, who do you like playing more?
I think I would go with Devontae, just based on his history and how he's performed against the Chiefs. I think A.J. Brown, I mean, he's typically been the guy this season, but I just think Devontae, he's just dominated this Chiefs team so much that it's hard for me to go against that.
Now, first touchdown is dicey, and our friends over at FanDuel and over at The Ringer wanted us to all come up with a first touchdown, which, just for everybody who is watching and listening, it is a lotto ticket. It is a roll of the dice, but we like rolls of the dice, except last night. They weren't too good to me, but that's a story for a different day. Raheem, you are continuing the trend of just hopping on Dallas Goedert everything because you like him for first touchdown?
Wow.
Yeah, I do like Dallas Goedert for first touchdown. And I think the interesting thing is that if you look at things historically, wide receivers tend to catch a first touchdown.
They do.
42% of the time. But I just think Dallas Goedert is the security blanket right now for Jalen Hurts. I like the Eagles to get up to a fast start. So I'm just going to ride Goddard. I'm playing the greatest hits.
Guys, you know I can't stand this dopey tush push. I want it gone. I'm sick of it. I'm over it. How apropos would it be if the Eagles go and march right down the field and Jalen Hurts steals the touchdown away from Saquon Barkley and it's A.J. Brown shoving him right into the end zone? That's how I'm playing first touchdown, House. I think Hurts gets it done.
Well, that's exactly right. You and I see the world the exact same way. The only guy that they might try and feed the Eagles is Saquon, because I do think that, as you know, script-wise, they're going to bread and butter this, which means lots of Saquon touches. But the thing that I do think is that if they see the opportunity, the Eagles, to push Saquon up, because Saquon can't win the MVP of the NFL. It's against the NFL's rules, right? It's got to be a quarterback. I love the idea of Saquon as the MVP of this game, and the first touchdown in this game certainly sets a tone.
So I feel like you are layering also. So when you play the over at one, whatever it is, 12, 113, which is, when you talk about a running back prop being that high, it sounds so outrageous. But then you think about the postseason and you think about the year he's had. House, I'm not betting the under.
Right.
No way.
Yeah. I'm not betting that one at all. I'm just not playing it because I do think the script that the dream outline of Philadelphia coming out and passing makes a lot of sense. And then you're really counting on Saquon doing what he's done quite a few times this season, which is breaking one, and it has to be significant to get to that 112 to 115 number, wherever that ultimately lands. So you don't have to mess with that. There's other ways to get invested in Saquon Barkley that give better return than a simple whatever it is, minus 114 on the yardage total.
So the interesting thing about that Saquon prop is actually being bet down. As we record
people
this
grabbing
right now,
the under.
Yes, a lot of the sharps are taking the under. I mean, it was 112, 111 or so. It's now down to 109.5. So it seems like the sharps are just betting this under. You know, a lot of times, there's just always value on the under,
of course,
in a lot of these playoff prop markets. So a lot of times what you can do is you can wait for the public to bet all of these numbers up, wait till around game time, and then play them under.
I like that. Now, let me make this clear. I'm going to give my pick out at the end of the show. But for anybody who's watching and listening, if you like the Philadelphia Eagles in this game, go and get involved in the alternate spreads. We talked about this, House. 2 weeks ago in the game against Washington, where I said, hey, Jaden Daniels had an amazing rookie year. If the game's close, he might find a way. But I think it kind of dictates margin. I think if Philadelphia is holding up the Lombardi Trophy, I think you can get involved at minus 6.5. I think you can get involved at minus 9.5. Because to me, if things are going their way, that is how they're stopping a Kansas City three-peat. Not in dramatic fashion.
Yeah, I absolutely love this. And I kicked myself because I missed out on that emotional hedge against my Washington team. I knew rationally I needed to have some exposure to an alt spread for Philadelphia. I won't make that same mistake again here in this instance against Kansas City. I think you're absolutely on the money. And I think like a 31-20 kind of game, it gets you right home.
And at 6.5 and 9.5, you're cashing both of those. And I had to sweat out that back door on 16.5, House. I will not be layering the Eagles at minus 16.5 for him. I'm not that brave.
Yeah, see, I totally agree. I think you have to knock the champion out. We know if this is a close game, Patrick Mahomes and that pedigree from Andy Reid, they're going to steal it. But I think if the Eagles are going to win this game, it's definitely by a touchdown or more.
Now, we gave you some Philadelphia player props. There are some Kansas City player props I want to get to. And, guys, I'm starting out guns a-blazing with a touchdown. That is a long shot. We like a long shot. It's Super Bowl week. I'm feeling frisky. You know I'm a sucker for narratives and storylines. Raheem, DeAndre Hopkins is playing in his first Super Bowl. DeAndre Hopkins, yes, has not been much of a factor the last few weeks. Mahomes has not been throwing him the ball a ton. But a guy who has this Hall of Fame-esque career, borderline Hall of Famer, may very well end up in Canton, Ohio. I think he has a moment or two in this game. I know it's asking a lot. Touchdown prices between 5 and 6 to 1. I like that. I'm rolling the dice there. I think he has 2+ catches in this game. To me, there are certain guys like where the moment, this is why Kansas City brought in a guy like this to go and help him out in a big spot. I'm getting involved with DeAndre Hopkins from a player perspective.
See, that's hard for me just because I think Kansas City has so many wide receivers.
They do.
I mean, you got Xavier Worthy, who's pretty much out-snapping everybody. You got guys like Marquise Brown. But if there's a time for DeAndre Hopkins to step up, it's definitely now. Me personally, I love Harrison Butker over a 7.
Well, there you go. You're going back to the well. Me too.
I've been playing it for so many times. I mean, if you look at 7 out of his last 9 postseason games, he's going over this. And the biggest reason why I like this is because the Chiefs are 22nd in red zone touchdown percentage. They're only converting 53% of their 76 red zone trips into touchdowns. Meanwhile, you look at the Eagles. We talk about their dominant defense. They are 4th in red zone touchdown percentage. So if you combine those two, I think you're going to get a lot of field goals. And then obviously the only 2 games in which Butker hasn't gone over this was against the Bills last week, where we know the Bills had a terrible red zone offense, and then a game against the Baltimore Ravens, who had a top-tier defense last year in the AFC Championship game. So give me this. I'm going to continue to play it. I've been playing it for the last 2 seasons. Why stop now?
It's a family play, JJ, because I know that you're on board with
All
this.
over it.
But look, one of the aspects to this that really jumps off the page, Kansas City is not a team that feels compelled to go for it on 4th down. This is why you have the Eagles inside the top 5 of the an entire NFL in terms of their conversion rate inside the red zone. Kansas City's content with field goals. And especially in this dome environment, they'll let Butker attempt, I think it's possible. I'm going to go ahead and have a little taste on longest field goal between 55 and 60 because I think they'll let him kick one.
In the dome, too.
Yeah, they won't go for it. I think they're going to go and try to get the
here's one
points.
we can add on to that. Chiefs over 1.5 made field goals.
Oh, in. Sign me up. And remember this about the Fangio defense. They will let you move the ball at will between the 20s. Where they have success is stopping you and making you go and kick field goals. Hey, even that playoff game, Vic Fangio, defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins, the frigid, cold ice bowl.
Yeah.
Kansas City kicked 4 field goals in that game.
Right.
Ooh.
Dolphins couldn't stop them between the 20s, but they were stingy in the red zone. This Eagle defense, healthier than the Dolphin defense we saw a year ago. I think Butker kicks a bunch of field goals. Now, guys, playing the hits. Travis Kelce in the Super Bowl is playing the hits. I don't care how public it is. I don't care how square it is. We're taking Goddard at 50-plus yards, and I'm taking Kelce at over 60 and 70. He will be involved. I know Raheem, he didn't have as big a role in the game against the Buffalo Bills. Look at what tight ends are doing. We are getting right on Travis Kelce.
Yeah, we're definitely getting on that. And then you have to also consider, because he's older, this extra week of prep
should help him.
It's definitely going to rest. I mean, it's going to be great. So I'm definitely riding with you there. And I think maybe you want to play some escalators. I think we play some escalators in that Houston Texans game. I think you can, get some adjusted spreads and get some odds on this one.
So the running backs for Kansas City, I think you have to be very careful here because Pacheco has had some monster Super Bowl moments. He's clearly not the guy he was last year and 2 years ago because of the way his body has betrayed him with the injuries and whatnot. And then you have Kareem Hunt, who has had some big games for the Chiefs, but is not nearly as physical a runner as Pacheco. I'm in a spot here, House, where I have a very, very hard time getting involved with anything with these Kansas City running backs because I don't know if Pacheco is going to look better with a week off and maybe the body is feeling better. Or is it that kind of year for him? I'm staying far, far away.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The only wager involving the Kansas City running game that I've heard that appeals to me is the idea of over 4.5 rushers. That means 5 different players have a rush for Kansas City. Now, you can get to 4 very easily. You've got Pacheco, you've got Mahomes, you've got Xavier Worthy coming out of the backfield, Kareem Hunt, obviously. Now you're looking at one more, and is it...
Maybe Hollywood Brown?
Maybe, exactly, an unexpected kind of jet sweep kind of vibe.
Or even Kelsey. They do those weird tight end plays.
Right. And then Samaje Perine is a, sort of under the radar kind of guy, might get a touch out of the backfield. So that's basically the only way I'm willing to consider Kansas City running attack at all.
I'm glad you brought up this topic because I actually have 2.
Okay, let's hear it.
2 ways to play this. We're going to go with Xavier Worthy over 5.5 rushing yards. If you look at his last 5 games, he's gone over this 4 times. He had 30 yards, 10 yards, 10 yards, 16 yards. So they run those little jet sweeps or those creative plays. He might pick this up on one run. So let's go that way. And in the second way we play a Kansas City rusher, we're going to go with Patrick Mahomes. Over 5.5 rushing attempts. In 2 playoff games this year, he's had 7 rushing attempts and 11 rushing attempts. What have we been saying all postseason? These running quarterbacks, they throw caution to the wind. They decide that because it's the postseason and it's time to win, they're going to run the ball. So Patrick Mahomes over 5.5 rushing attempts. And also,
the kneel downs, they count.
The kneel downs count.
They count.
Even at the end of a half.